Good morning and welcome. This is the State Water Resources Control Board Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program Fee Stakeholder Workshop. My name is David Ceccarelli. I'm the branch chief of the fees at the State Water Board. With me today in the meeting is Glenn Osterhage, who's also with the fee branch. Also joining us is John Russell, the Deputy Director of the Division of Administrative Services. And also in the room, may not be on camera right now, he's manning our computer, is Justin Davis, also the fee branch. We also have program staff from ELAP joining us on the teleconference. So today's meeting is a webcast meeting. There is a teleconference phone number, and I'm gonna go over that number. It's 1-888-808-6929. And there's a participant code, which is 460678. Currently, this phone number, it's on mute right now, so we actually have everyone on mute. And the plan is once staff go over the presentation, we'll be unmuting the phone and having some dialogue and being able to, an opportunity to ask questions and answer questions and provide feedback. I do want to mention that there may be a delay that's taking place. We've heard, some individuals that are listening or are on the webcast have kind of a real time, but others are maybe experiencing a delay. With that said, what we'll do is, we'll be pausing at times. That way, if there's again, questions, we'll wait till you hear our presentation. Throughout the meeting, if you'd like to send in a question, you can please do by the email that's on the agenda. So please just kind of click on that link and go ahead and email us, and we'll be responding to those as those emails come in. We also ask that during the open conversation period, when we open up the phone lines, that you please state your name, who you are and who you represent. Therefore, everyone that's on the phone, and for us, that we know who's participating. With that said, we will go ahead and get started. Again, we're going to, go through the fee slides, and what I will say is that this is basically the fourth opportunity of us speaking about the fee structure and how we got to this point. Basically, this is over the last year and a half. This is basically the third fee stakeholder meeting, and there was also a board workshop back in December at the same time that ELAP was going through the regulations at the workshop. So the structure that you're going to see today is, we've built on this throughout the year and a half, and based on some feedback that we've received from stakeholders, from our board members, staff has now developed a structure, and that we're here to present and here to have a discussion with. So with that said, our objective is to introduce this proposed fee structure. We definitely like to limit the scope of this meeting only to fees. If you have more program related questions or more related to the regulations, please direct those to ELAP, and I know they'll be more than happy to help answer those questions. Again, this proposed fee conforms with the ELAP regulations, which were approved and adopted by the board on May 5th of 2020. So kind of going over some of the goals for the fee regulations, we're looking for a structure that's sustainable. We want to develop a fee structure that will generate enough revenue that's reliable to cover program expenditures year after year. You may be aware of this. We've had these discussions before. This program is fully supported by fees. There's no journal fund or any subsidies So the fee-paying community pays for this program, and so we're looking to put into place a fee structure that meets our budgetary authority. Again, generate sufficient revenue to support the program. By the whole program, we mean full range of functions, which is not reliant on the funds with, drinking water or the water board. Our proposed fee structure, we're targeting generating approximately $4 million in the May revise budget. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a sec, but the budget for the ELAP program is roughly $4 million, about $4.1 million. And so the structure that you're going to see today, based on, again, our assumptions and our estimates based on, the number of labs and the number of field of accreditations and the number of labs that will be using the ELAP program for assessments. We, as program staff, have analyzed would generate the projected $4 million. And again, it conforms with the ELAP regulations adopted by the board on May 5th, 2020. Once that was adopted, and of course it goes into effect October 1st of 2020, and again, that's when these regs would go into effect also. With that said, the new structure is no longer functionable based on these new regs, which basically means that a new fee structure needs to be put in place. So next slide, please. So the fee setting process. So annually we review program expenditures and revenue estimates. We review each iteration of the budget. We determine, throughout the year, we look at and monitor the balance of our revenue and expenditures within the fund to determine if the program can maintain a prudent reserve based on the amount of budget appropriation. In January is when the governor's proposed budget comes out. It's followed by revisions in May, and then there's an enacted budget. And then through this process, we evaluate it to determine what our expenditures are. We look at if there's any reserve in the fund that can help maybe minimize increases if needed. And then, we set a fee structure. We determine if the fee schedule needs to be adjusted. That is, determination whether projected fund balance at the end of the year is going to have sufficient to maintain a prudent reserve. If there's a point where the budget deficit has become large enough that the program fund would not withstand the reduction or a hit of the fund reserve, then we will have to consider increasing the revenue throughout our fee structure. In this case, we will run scenarios, offer several fee options to achieve a prudent reserve, to include as many interested parties as we can in this process. Again, we conduct stakeholder meetings throughout the year. For the most part, a lot of you have been involved in our process. When the program came over from the Department of Public Health, my fee staff, budget staff, we really got involved in looking at the budget, looking at revenues, and there was definitely a huge shortfall in this program when it came to revenue and expenditures, and that was when we had to start the meeting, start the discussions, and kind of have these discussions of how can we kind of get the program whole. And we did fee increases over the last 3 to 4 years just to kind of get us where we're at today to make the program whole. Again, that was a result of this program coming over and having a huge shortfall in revenue, mainly due to the program when it was at Public Health not having fee increases for about 10 years. And during that same time, of course, costs continue to go up. So we propose changes to the fee schedule taken to the board for consideration and adoption. And we're staff, so we make proposals and we come up with an option, and then we make that proposal to the board. But it's the board who makes the final decision on adopting a structure. And then Our fees are implemented via the emergency rulemaking process. So the fee structure we're sharing with you today will be enacted through the emergency rulemaking process as compared to the ELAP board adopted regulations, which are going through the regular rulemaking process. So, and before I kind of touch basis here on, some of our prior meetings, we understand, we're closely monitoring the budget, and the $4 million is what we anticipate currently under the May revise to support the ELAP program. Many of you have seen, there's a potential of having some type of reductions in, state service, meaning there's a potential of having, employee compensation cut by 10%. There potentially may be some other savings. So we're really monitoring that. And if something comes out where we see a reduction in our budgetary expenditures for this fund and this program, it's something that we'll internally look at and potentially make some adjustments to the structure where I see that potentially taking place would be on the base fee, since everyone pays towards the base fee. So just hypothetically, if we, the fund had a reduction, a savings of $300,000 or $400,000, we'll look at help trying to reduce the base fee portion and looking at trying to pass some of that savings on to the fee payers, knowing that, again, it's a budget process, and of course the budget's adopted every year. So again, this may be kind of a one-time savings for fiscal year 2021, but we'll kind of continue to monitor the program and our expenditures. So this slide here is, again, previous stakeholder engagement. So as you can see, we've had 3 other meetings / workshops where we've had some discussions about the fee structure and the options. And as early as June 13th of 2019, there was some discussion of what the fee regulations could look like, meaning using third-party assessors and moving to the field of accreditations other than the field of testing. And so we, as fee staff, we put out some options of how that could look. And from there, we started to kind of narrow it down. And then we had another meeting in November where we received feedback on these options. And at the board meeting, options were presented to our board members. And we also, again, we received some, positive feedback from stakeholders and also from the board members. And our plan was to have a stakeholder meeting in March, but of course with COVID-19 hit, everything was moved back, and so that's where we're at today. We're having a stakeholder meeting based on feedback and moving forward with our fee structure. So what you see today, I don't believe there's any surprises, meaning that the structure is similar to what we've talked about in the past, but we've made a few slight adjustments. We have a better understanding of what our costs look like in the budget, plus we have a better idea of kind of the number of labs and some assumptions on the number of field of accreditations in each of these labs. So kind of with that said, we're kind of where we're at with the fee structure. So next slide. And so the new proposed fee structure, on May 5th, 2020, the board adopted the ELAP regulations, which will go into effect on October 1st of 2020. And some of the key features related to the fees, one, there's use of a third-party assessors, the TPAs. there are fees for labs located inside and outside of California. And then we have some fee categories, a base fee, which is similar to what our base fee is today, a fee for per field accreditation, FOA, the assessment fee, the reciprocity fee for out of state, and then we have some new fees that we're putting in, fees for amendments and a late fee, which Glenn Osterhage will go over and have these discussions with these different categories.
All right, thank you, David. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So on each of these categories, those of you who've been around for a while are familiar with most of these. Some of you on the line or on the webcast may be newer on terminology, so we'll briefly go over each one of these components, and then we'll show a proposed structure that we're looking to go forward with. So as David said, there's a base fee. This is paid by all labs on an annual basis. In general, this fee is the general costs that are borne by all labs. It doesn't vary by site, so it's a flat base fee for each facility.
I'm sorry. And then I apologize, Glenn, and I just wanted to add in, I wasn't sure if you're moving on to the next point here, but talking about the base fee, and when the program was brought over, we've had discussion about all fee payers paying towards this, indirect cost. And when we look at the $44 million budget of the program, roughly 40% of that is our indirect cost. So roughly about $1.6 million. So everyone that pays this base fee pays towards those indirect costs.
Thank you, David. So again, this is I call it the base or the flat portion of the fee that's consistent across all facilities. The next portion is the per FOA fee. Again, this is paid annually by all labs. There's different terms. On this slide, we call it a tiered structure. Some people call it a bracketed structure. That as you have more FOAs, you'll pay a higher fee towards that. And this reflects, as stated here on the slide, the variable nature of the program and different activities associated with the increased complexities. So as you have more FOAs, you're going to pay a higher per FOA fee that's added on top of the base fee. And then we have the assessment fee. This is paid every 2 years just by those labs that are utilizing the Water Board's ELAP for the assessment. Labs that are using the third-party assessors, the TPAs, will pay their assessment fee directly to the TPA. So you're not paying both, you're paying one or the other. If the work's being done by the Water Board staff, the assessment fee, again, is every 2 years assessed. If you're using the third-party assessor, you'll pay them for that fee. We list out here just some general hourly rates so people understand why we came up with the assessment amount. Costs obviously go up each year, but we're roughly, and this includes all costs, indirect and direct for staffing, about $180 per hour. The ballpark range of 30 to 90 hours is just an estimate. Some could be a little bit less, some could be more, but it shows the flexibility or the dynamics of the assessment portion of the program. So again, if you're using ELAP at the water boards, you'll pay this fee every 2 years. And then you have the option of going to TPA for your assessment separately. Okay. As David mentioned, we have the reciprocity fee. This is paid by out-of-state labs. So if you're located outside the state of California, this fee is consistent with what other states do. So a California lab going to, say, Oregon, I believe, uses it. They would pay a reciprocity fee to the state of Oregon's for their program. So it is consistent with some of the nationwide processes. The amendment fee, so this is paid by labs utilizing ELAP for the assessment. We're defining 3 different categories for the complexity. The first one, again, we'll show you the chart of the costing for these a little bit later. But if you're adding additional FOAs, there's a cost for that. If you're adding in a satellite or mobile lab, there's costs to go through that. And obviously, if you're changing a lab location. So we'll show you a little bit later the cost structure for each one of these amendment fees. So it's additional costs that we have to reimburse staff time for. And then the final bullet point under the amendment fee is labs utilizing the TPAs are not required to pay the amendment fees if they have to pay the TPA directly. But if you're doing an administrative change that requires ELAP involvement to process the amendment application, then there will be a fee associated with that. And the final one is just a late fee. The purpose of this is not to be punitive, but we want people to get into compliance, make sure they're submitting their applications on a timely manner, they're paying the fees on a timely manner, and there's a cost to the water board to go after this extra workload to make sure people are filing and paying for their fees on a regular basis. So it's not a very high one. Again, we'll show you the proposed costs associated with that. So we have a number of different categories we've gone through. We've got the base fee, we have a per FOA fee, we have the assessment fee, we have the reciprocity fee, the amendment, and depending on the type of the amendment, and then there's a late fee associated with that. Next slide, please. So as I said, here's the slide where is our proposal. The base fee is consistent with one that was shown at a prior meeting. We're proposing a base fee of $2,500. That's, again, for every facility. We'll pay that on a yearly basis. And then here's where we have, again, depending on which terminology you want to use, tiers or brackets or groupings of FOAs. So if you're a lab that has 5 FOAs, you're going to pay $2,800 on an annual basis. That's a $2,500 base fee and a $300 for that range of 1 to 10. Obviously, as the increase in the FOAs go up, the cost associated with that goes up as well. Then at the very bottom of that table, we have the reciprocity fee. So out-of-state fees will pay an additional $5,000 for their fee on top of, again, the base fee and their FOA component. And then we have the assessment fee, which is, again, paid every other year, so once every 2 years. Main labs is $5,000 every 2 years. Satellite labs is $2,500 every 2 years. Next slide. And then here are the amendment types. So again, we have multiple different types of amendments, and the proposed fee, we're going to go with each one of those. Just a straight administrative review is $200. The assessment 1 amendment, which is adding FOAs, is $1,000 for the amendment. Assessment type 2, which is adding a satellite or mobile lab, is $2,500. And if you're doing a third level assessment, which is changing your lab location, there's a $5,000 fee for that to change that. And then here's the late fees. If you're after the application due date, there's a 15% of the accreditation fee added on. And after certification renewal date, an additional 30%. So again, we're trying not to be punitive there. It's just trying to make sure facilities are paying on a timely manner. So I don't know, David, if I get everything?
Yes, and I will add, since we're on this slide about the amendment and late fees, of course, you know, we know that each year that there's workload associated with staff doing amendments, and the current process is staff will, you know, get amendments and they'll do that work, and it's almost being absorbed, and that's why we thought that it's important that if someone wants to put an amendment in and there's a workload associated with that, what the structure does is capture that revenue for that service. And with the late fees, this revenue, you know, we're not projecting in the $4 million, of course, because we don't know, again, how many amendments and how many may be subject to a late fee. But what it'll allow us to do is if you know, we do generate some revenue, it'll help the reserve and the fund as we move into the, you know, following fiscal years and things like that. But again, you know, we're not projecting this portion of the revenue towards the $4 million.
If we can go back to slide 9, please. The one thing I wanted to point out is anytime that we change a methodology or change a structure of a fee, it takes 1, 2, 3 years for things to kind of settle down. As David indicated, we're working on estimates of the number of FOAs the labs will have. So as we go through the first year, if we see that something, this is my term, is kind of out of whack or it's not what we intended it to be, we do have the annual emergency rulemaking where we can go back and adjust these appropriately once we get 2 or 3 years of consistent data, and we can analyze what staff is working on in more detail. So Whatever we propose, it can be amended later depending on how things actually work out. Again, I've worked on a number of different programs. Estimates never come to fruition as greatly as we want to. We want to try to be as tight and spot on as possible, but there's always a couple of outliers that tend to change the dynamics just a little bit, and we can address those next year or the year after as we get more familiar with the process.
And I think that's a good point that Glenn brought up. We're basically we're starting fresh here because, this is a new program, new regulations, which meant, a new structure needs to be put in place for fees. And it may take a couple of years to flush out not only the revenue, but of course the expenditure side of things, meaning the staffing. And that's kind of where we get stakeholders involved in continuing these discussions with the stakeholder meetings. If you've, we've had these continued meetings in the last several years, but as those that participate in our water quality and water rights and drinking water meetings, we have multiple meetings throughout the year to discuss the fees and discuss the expenditures of these programs. So, although, we're here proposing this and, something, definitely we're going to take a fee structure to the board for their consideration and adoption. There's, throughout the next year and a half, we'll continue to, work with stakeholders and program staff about, are there ways that we can modify the structure as we move forward?
If we can move to slide 11. And to sum it all up, and we're about to finish up our, David will finish up the presentation before we start taking email questions and opening up the phone lines. Just to summarize for those, a lot of information is how do you calculate your fee? Simplistically, every lab on an annual basis will pay a base fee plus the per FOA tier or bracket amount. If you're using ELAP for the assessment, you'll pay that every 2 years. If you're using a third party for the assessment, that assessment will be paid directly to the third party. And if you're an out-of-state lab, you'll have an additional reciprocity fee will be added, plus whatever if you have an amendments or late fees. But the basis of the annual fees are on the base fee, the per FOA, what type of an assessment, water board assessment, you pay us every 2 years, third-party assessment, you'll pay them directly, and then out-of-state will have an additional charge on it. So that's a summary of how we will calculate the fees based off of the prior 2 slides with our proposal. Next slide. I'm going to hand it back over to David to finish up with the next steps.
So one thing, of course, there's not a bullet on here, but if you have some takeaways and you have some questions, of course, after this meeting, we definitely want to hear feedback and we want to have some dialogue. So please reach out to us. We are asking though, we are in a time constraint of kind of moving this through the process. And so with that said, after this meeting, if there's follow-up questions or if there's some information that you'd like, please contact us. But we're asking for that information, that feedback, those questions by next Thursday. So that would be June 18th by close of business, and give us an opportunity to kind of analyze and look at that information. Looking again at next steps, so we're scheduled to take a proposed fee structure to the board for consideration and adoption on July 21st of 2020 at a board meeting. And again, it's through emergency regulations. And if adopted, then these fees will go into effect on October 1st, 2020, coinciding with ELAP's regulations with the current fee structure remaining active until that time. And, one thing I want to add, and, John Russell has kind of mentioned this in prior meetings. Of course, we're reviewing the budget. In this program, it's a new program, meaning a new structure. We recognize there's some impacts. There's going to be impacts to fee payers. We're if we see some savings, through the adopted budget, we'll do our best to try to pass that on to stakeholders. The fee revenue generated for this program, is within the fiscal year. So what I mean by that is traditionally it's July 1 through June 30th. Of course, the structure will be adopted on October 1st and go into effect on that date. With that said, staff is open to if there's a question about paying your fee that we'd like for you to contact us. We don't have the ability to waive any fees, of course, because of course these fees pay for our staff time. But if there is something we can do, meaning at minimally, if there's maybe working on a slight payment plan, or maybe it's 2 payments instead of making 1 full payment at one time, it's something that we want to talk to you about, and have that dialogue and have those considerations. So we are understanding COVID-19 and some of the issues that the state and with the economy is going through. We also we're trying to, again, the importance of having ELAP and having the staff do the workload and pay for that staff. We also understand the importance of that. With that said, Glenn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is this is the culmination of multi-years of program working through getting the new regulations in place. When it came over to the water boards, it wasn't a large structural deficit, and the funding wasn't there as far as the revenue. So it's taken many years for the program staff and the fees to kind of align each other. So they're kind of on different paths working together. But with the adoption of the new regulations last month and us going to our board proposing a change to the fee structure, we'll finally get revenue and program into alignment with each other, regulations and fees working together instead of them kind of being on separate tracks with each other.
So what I'll do now is I'm going to ask Justin Davis if there are some emails that have come in. And if so, those questions, if he can read the question, who it's from, and then we can go ahead and help try to respond to those at this point.
We do have one email question before we open up the phone calls, and this might be for a program, but Chris from Marin Municipal Water District just is asking us to briefly describe the difference between an FOA and an FOT.
And we'll open that phone line so we can get programmed to actually answer that. So if Christine or Jacob's on the line, if you can explain the difference between the FOA and FOTs.
As we're waiting, reminder, there may be a delay here, so we're going to hold on here while we wait for a program who might be on a delay to jump in and answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so we heard some comments that there's some music being played in the background and they can't hear the comments, so we may have some technical difficulties with some of these on the phone. So on the email question, which is more programmatic, we have that down. Hopefully the issue with the connection will be resolved here in a moment as we try to get Christine on the line to answer the question on the differences between FOA and FOTs.
Thank you all. This is Christine. Hi, this is Christine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So the difference between an FOA and an FOT is a field of accreditation is what FOA stands for, and it's an individual description of what the laboratory is requesting accreditation for. Field of testing is a group of methods, subgroup analyte combinations that a laboratory is requesting accreditation for. FOA is a line item of a method analyzer matrix. So it's breaking out the fields of testing that we used to charge labs for and now breaking them out into line items.
And Christine, this is David Ceccarelli. I wanted to confirm with you, in the past, we assessed a fee based on, as you mentioned, field of testing. However, within the field of testing, there could be one FOA or there could be multiple FOAs. And so, when you were looking at, at Lab A and Lab B, they would be paying the same amount in the FOT, but one lab may have, again, 10 FOAs having to be reviewed and managed compared to the other lab, which may only have one. That's correct, right, Christina?
Hi, David. Yes, that is correct. And it would affect the program such that we would be offering services for accreditation, traveling, and spending more money on one lab as opposed to the other, and both pay the same fee.
Thank you.
FOA breaks down the line items of what the laboratory is requesting accreditation for.
Hey, Justin, have we got any other email questions?
We do have a few that just came in.
Okay.
Christine, if you could hang on there with us. This next one is asking about the amendment fee for a change in laboratory location, and they want to know what constitutes a location change. Would remodeling a lab on the existing property be a location change?
So that's a good question. I think that every lab is different. Sometimes laboratories install new facilities within their footprint. Sometimes it's farther away. I think that anytime there's a change in the operation of laboratories, you need to notify ELAP, and then we will probably look at it on a case-by-case basis. But because it may affect the quality of the data and how you oversee the lab with this change in location. So hopefully that answers the question.
The next question, Jill from Burley and Race Laboratories says, currently there are some labs are exempt from fees. Would the new proposal still allow those labs to be exempt from fees? I'm not aware that there are any labs exempt from fees, but Christine, could you confirm that?
Yeah, so I also am not aware of labs that are exempt from fees. In our law, though, we did have public health laboratories that were exempt, but the law was changed a little bit after we came over from public health. And the reason why if they do not pay fees is that they are a reference laboratory in that they don't run any regulatory samples for any state agency. They only run samples for confirmatory purpose for another state body. And so, again, they would only be exempt from fees if they didn't run regulatory samples. So, yeah, so right. I also am not aware of labs that are exempt from fees. In our law, though, we did have public health laboratories that were exempt, but the law was changed a little bit after public health. And the reason why if they do not pay fees is that they are a reference laboratory in that they don't run any regulatory samples for any state agency. They only. So I don't know if I'm muted or not, but I think that's a legal question for OCC and Kim, which I believe.
Yeah, I'm on the line. So, but I think you answered that correctly. I mean, that's the only fees that I'm aware of that are the only labs that aren't paying fees, just the reference laboratories.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, so Michelle from the Irvine Ranch Water District just wants some clarification on the amendment fees. If a lab is using a third-party assessor and they submit an amendment application, would they pay ELAP $1,000 total or $1,000 for each FOA? And first of all, I want to clarify that if you're using a third-party assessor, you're not paying that fee to us. You're going to be paying the third-party assessor to do your accreditation, so you will just be paying the administrative fee. Those amendment fees are only for labs using ELAP for accreditation.
Correct. And I believe also that there may be situations where you would have to, when you're doing the amendment, then also pay for an on-site assessment. So that would be an additional fee. You would not necessarily pay for additional FOAs because generally people will stay within that grouping of FOAs. Okay. I suppose if it moved you into a new FOA group, you would pay that difference, but that would be minimal.
And we have some questions from Debbie Webster from the Central Valley Clean Water Association. First one, she's asking for if we could provide the number of labs in each bracket, and she states that she requested this at the November 7th meeting, and just letting you know that we've been working on this for a few months. It's been in flux as ELAP has categorized all the FOTs and FOAs, but we do have the information now and we can share it with you. Second, if there is staff cuts, does ELAP anticipate continuing its level of service in all categories, including all extra costs such as assessments?
So Christine, you want to take that one?
So I'm not sure what the question was. Can you repeat it, please?
If there are staff cuts, does ELAP anticipate continuing its level of service in all categories, including all extra costs such as assessments?
So I think the question is directed towards the governor's reduction in staffing, or I don't know of any cuts of staff. We have a statutory and regulatory requirement to accredit labs under the California Water Code, so we will do our best to continue accrediting labs for the state agencies that rely on our service. And we do have the ability to conduct remote assessments, and we're working with EPA on that. So,
Yeah, and this is David Ceccarelli here. I mean, as of right now, what we know of the budget, there's no staffing cuts. However, we'll continue to monitor it. If there's something where programs do need to be reduced, then internally, staff will have to get together and look at the overall program and look at the priorities, and then move forward from there. But as of right now, the funding, and I believe right now it's 25 positions that are associated with the ELAP program, and then the May revised budget, those all 25 are being funded. So as of right now, no, there's no plan on cuts of those positions. But again, if something is in the budget where we have to do some reductions of staffings, it's something where program would get together, make an evaluation, and look at priorities, and move forward from there.
I was just going to add in, and Debbie, you can always reach out to us separately if the question was more towards the governor's proposal to reduce salaries. That's not changing the number of staffing, it's just reducing how much we get paid. So our costs could go down, but the staff workload will remain the same. I'm not sure if that's what you were intending on that question or not.
And that was something where earlier I kind of mentioned if our level of staff at this point is anticipated to stay the same. It's just that the expenditure levels of pay for that staff, there's a potential that may be reduced, and that's the opportunity where we can pass that on to the stakeholders by potentially lowering that base fee.
Debbie also is asking us to go over again the reason why for amendment fees are not applicable to TPAs when they're being used. She says, I do not understand why ELAP would not have work associated with an amendment even if the TPA is used.
So before I think Christine might jump in on some of the more programmatic details, so there will be the administration.
Can you clarify the question again? Why I didn't understand.
I think essentially Debbie just wants to know why isn't a lab being charged an amendment fee if a TPA is being used?
Why are they being charged?
Aren't they?
So Kim, I think the question is, they will not be charged an amendment fee if they're using a third-party assessor. They may be charged the administration portion, but any changes will be as it applies to the third-party assessor, which they're paying directly to the third-party assessor. So Kim or Christine, if you want to jump in on the legal or more programmatic side of that question, go for it.
Did you want to say something, Glenn, before I respond?
I'm guessing Christine's probably on the delay, so I'm done talking here. So once you get this, my hand waving, then you know I'm done.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the amendment fee is if a laboratory wants to add an FOA to their current scope. And if it's sophisticated instrumentation, they go to a third party to do that assessment. And the assessment is done by the third party, and the laboratory would submit an application to us for amending their scope. And they would pay the administrative fee. And so that's the standard amendment fee that we're talking about. And it's less work for ELAP because we don't have to conduct the assessment, and the work is also less administratively burdensome for us. So that's why the fee is set in that manner.
Okay, thank you. And Justin, any other questions?
Yes, Debbie also wants to know, overall with this fee structure, how is this impacting the cost of accreditation for small labs with only a few FOAs?
I think, can you go to the slide where it has the tier structure?
Fine.
Slide 9. So one thing that we've looked at over the last few meetings is the tier itself. And early on, we had a tier of 1 through 50, and I believe that fee was around $1,200. And a lot of the feedback we heard was, for smaller labs that have, very few FOAs, is there a way to provide some type of reduction there? And so, we've taken that feedback and we heard it from multiple stakeholders, and we did modify the tier structure where we added in, we broke out the 1 through 50, and now we have 1 through 10, which captures the smaller labs, and they would be paying, of course, the $2,500 and then the $300 base fee. So they would have a $2,800 annual fee, and then depending on, we anticipate that the smaller labs with the less sophisticated technology would use us, and then our cost of an assessment fee would be $5,000 once every 2 years, and so that's the breakout. Again, we heard from the stakeholders, and that's where we try to make the adjustment of some savings to the smaller labs. Glenn, anything you want to add on that? Justin, anything you want to add?
I would just add, if you're asking about the cost of accreditation, as Glenn mentioned earlier in the presentation, that ELAP anticipates using, even for the smallest labs, 25, 30 hours, and at an hourly rate, that's still above the $5,000 cost. So you're still getting it at a slight discount, I think, and small labs still have the option of using a third-party assessor if they feel they can save costs that way.
So, there is the opportunity to, shop around and see if there's an opportunity to find an assessment less than $5,000 and provide some cost savings there also.
If I could add as well, a lot of focus has been towards the third-party assessment agencies, but there's always the ability, because we have adopted the TNI standard into our regulations, for other state accrediting bodies to assess labs in California, which is done often from Utah and Oregon, who is just next door to us. And so they can call them as well to come and assess their labs, and we would utilize that inspection reports to grant them accreditation in California.
Next question, a couple questions. Josie from the City of Davis, like to know on the assessment fees, or I think she means amendment fees, if adding FOAs is a $1,000 fee, does this include additional FOA fee if the new addition bumps you into a higher level tier?
So depending on the timing, yes, you would pay on your next, I'm going to say assessment, your next annual fee that comes through. It will reflect the higher number of the FOAs that you're being assessed for. So you'll pay the amendment fee to increase your number of FOAs, and then on your next cycle, you'll be assessed at the higher tier amount. Justin, did I answer that one correctly?
I believe so. Next question,
Yeah, this is Kim. I think we talked about this before, and that's the way I understood it too.
Thank you, Kim.
That's what was being intended.
This might be for a program, but should any of the amendments require a separate on-site assessment, will it have to be done prior to the issuance of the certificate, or can it be incorporated with the next on-site assessment prior to the last certificate expiration date?
Can you repeat that?
Hi.
I think
Christine, you
there's a
want me to
request
repeat
to
it?
repeat that one, Justin, and I think Christine will jump in.
Okay.
Should any of the above amendment require a separate on-site assessment, will it have to be done prior to the issuance of certificate of the new FOA, therefore a new on-site assessment fee, or can it be incorporated with the next on-site assessment prior to the last certificate expiration date?
So in general, the way that the regulations are written and adopted by the board is that to apply for accreditation, an on-site assessment report has to be included in the package. So if you want to include anything new, then if you have to go to a TPA, if you use sophisticated instruments, you'll have to go to them and get the report and get assessed, get that all squared away, and then include it in your application. There's varying ways that labs can apply, and I just want to say that we are scheduling one-on-one transition appointments with laboratories that are all expiring within this year to align them and get them to clear and understand what their compliance requirements are, so that there is less confusion. But I hope that answered the question. I think there's a lot of variability for every laboratory, and these case-by-case questions are I could answer them, but I recommend that you email ELAP, and we can respond to your specific questions also during our one-on-one appointments.
Josie's final question was, does ELAP have the list of FOAs posted on their website? And if not, when can they expect that?
So, no, we don't have the field of accreditations posted to our webpage, but when the regulations become effective, then we will post them to our webpage.
Jared Voskuhl from the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. Christine, he's asking if you could just briefly re-explain the difference between FOT and FOA again, and also are fees based on FOAs now?
So Christine, before you jump in,
Okay.
I was going to say, as far as the fee, when you say is it based off the FOA now, actually I may have to punt this one to Christine as well. It'll be based off the number of FOAs at the time your new assessment is due. Is that right, Justin? No,
No, right now they're based on FOTs.
Wow.
They're not based on FOAs.
Okay.
And Jared, if you're on the phone call, you have a couple other questions. If you just want to jump in and ask them, it might be easier. But in the meantime, Christine, yeah,
can I
if you
answer
just
that?
explain the difference.
So that we don't have a huge package of questions I have to unpack. So as far as the definition of a field of accreditation, it means a matrix technology method analyte combination, which we will offer, and it's defined in the 2016 TNI standard that we adopted. So I recommend the folks read that. And then when it will be effective is depending, right, on when these regulations are adopted, these emergency regulations. So maybe the DAS folks C branch folks will like to answer that.
Yeah, I think I got out of cycle my response. I was thinking once the regulations went into effect, the FOA fee would be applicable at that time. Currently, fees are based off the FOT. David, anything you want to add?
And Jared's final question is, the last workshop, there seemed to be labs with a small amount of FOAs, but would be at the same fee level as labs with 50 FOAs. Is that correct? And I'll just briefly answer that. We did amend the proposed fee structure. You're correct, at the last workshop, the lowest tier was 1 to 49 FOAs. And based on feedback that we received from the stakeholder community, we did implement a 1 through 10 tier that is less than what was proposed last time. And so I don't have any further email questions at this time. If there's anyone on the phone has any comments.
And again,
I do.
oh, go ahead. Again, remind people there is a delay for some people, so we'll try to make sure we don't have people jump in and off depending on their time delay.
Yeah. So I just want to mention for those folks on the phone that want to know more about third-party assessors, we had a webinar on Monday. We're posting that video to the board's videos page via YouTube, and so you can watch. We invited invited the 4 TPAs to talk about their company and also some perspectives from other state agencies state accreditation programs that utilize TPAs, and then some perspectives from a municipal lab and commercial lab. And then we released an FAQ, which the laboratory community helped us with. We gathered the questions from the associations and put them together, and so we're really grateful for those questions, and we answered them in an FAQ, and we're more than happy to update that FAQ with any one of these questions today that may not have been included. So I would recommend everyone reading and visiting our webpage for that information and watching the YouTube video from the board.
We did have a few more emails come in. Amber Baylor, the Director of Environmental Compliance with South Orange County Wastewater Authority, says in the initial statement of reasons indicated that utilizing third-party assessments, the workload for assessments will be cut by approximately 50%. How will this affect the number of people that ELAP now is funded for within the context of staff reduction? shouldn't that reduction in cost be passed on to the labs, not using TPAs?
So I can take a crack at that, and I think Kenneth's on the phone as well. I just want to remind everybody that this is a new program and a new fee structure, and we were not aligned with the amount of staff to do the workload that we had. And so we've said that the demand for on-site assessment outpaces the number of staff that we have. And so pushing the sophisticated instrumentation that we don't have the technical expertise to perform is helping us, but it still leaves us with a work to run a whole accreditation program. And so, you know, again, as what David mentioned earlier, this is a new program, this is a new fee structure, and we have to look at it that way.
Thank you, Christine. And also from my earlier comments, after a number of years of program working on the new regulations, we're finally getting fees mirrored up with program expectations on their workload. So as Christine said before, staff wasn't able to do everything required. So this will allow us to put those two together for the first time.
Hi, this is Jared Voskel with CASA, and I wanted to follow up on the FOA and FOT question. My webcast had cut out, and so I missed the response explaining that difference. But I think there was a general question on whether any equivalency was utilized in terms of setting the ranges so that to minimize variation in fee changes. So if you're a lab that had X number of FOTs, the fees would essentially be equivalent to what they're paying now through the new proposed FOA table that was, and then that was kind of one question generally, if that equivalency there is there. And then the second question was whether actual lab data that you have about the labs that are accredited and the number of FOTs or FOAs they're accredited for, if that information was utilized with that division of 1 to 10 and 11 to 50. And I thought I'd seen a presentation previously kind of laying out the different size variability, and some of the very small and small labs would be maybe within only the first 1 to 20, 1 to 25 FOAs, but then all of a sudden you have more medium-sized labs that are in that higher FOA range. And I was kind of curious about how those issues were handled and accounted for in this modeling. Thank you.
So I'll take the first part as far as trying to compare or trying to minimize the fee changes for someone going from an FOT to FOA. It's not possible. We have a set budget amount we're trying to achieve. As David said, it's the $4 million range. Anytime you dramatically change a methodology or a fee structure, there's no way to have everyone pay comparable to what they did before, separate from the fact that a number of facilities will be taking their third-party assessor fee out of our jurisdiction. But that aside, it's just a difference. As David said, someone who had an FOT before may have 10, 15, let's actually be higher than 10, let's say 20 FOAs. Another facility paying for a single FOT before may only have 1 or 2. So the differences in the old structure, there was a lot of variability, which in each of the FOTs, as Christina said, we're trying to put each assessment on its own platform and charge by the number, the number of accreditations. Sorry, I used the wrong term there. So that was the first part. Jared, if you can repeat the second part, I didn't get all that gist of that one.
Sure, and not to have a nested for loop of questions here, but kind of in response to this first part, was there an analysis done to try to see if there was equivalency between that, or any kind of modeling to exhibit just that variability you talked about? And I guess there's another question in there is, you mentioned the third-party assessors and the fees that are going to them are not going to the program. Is that result in a decrease of fees to the program? So in terms of getting to that $4 million, if the money's going to a TPA now and not to the program for their assessment, is that having to be made up through FOAs for people who aren't going to the third parties?
Yes.
And then that other question was just in terms of how those FOAs were divided out, those groups, if the size of the lab was accounted for I didn't know if there was the 10 to 50 is arbitrary, might not be the right word, but if that was just a range that was selected, or if it actually tied to, we have this number of labs in the program that have this many of FOAs, and these are small labs, or these are very small labs, or these are medium-sized labs. And so that's kind of how those brackets pair out for those labs, so that in essence, you wouldn't have a small lab or a very small lab having a really sharp increase in fees, whereas a medium-sized lab with this, grouping maybe wouldn't have as much of an increase. And so I guess to be disproportionately borne by the smaller labs is kind of the concern.
So before I try to hand it off to program, because their group did the analysis of the FOA brackets and tiers. Again, we want to state this is the first attempt to do this. We can review it after the first year or two just to kind of see where things kind of shake out. So I'm going to hand it off. I don't know, Christine, if you know, because I know Andrew worked with our staff on providing the tiers breakdown. I don't know if there was any logic on the 1 to 10 and then 11 through 49. If there's any analysis there other than saying 10's a nice round number to cut it off. So I don't know, Christine, if you can jump in on that one. Do you know?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So I just want to say that there was a lot of thought that went into keeping these fees low for our laboratory community. But still, we wanted to be fair in terms of what the cost is to us to accredit laboratories and do the work. It's not to us the idea of small, medium, large labs. It's based on the work that you're asking for, not the size of your lab or the kind of your type of lab. But at the same regard, we're extremely sensitive, and we're working with DAS on trying to figure out some sort of tier that works best for all labs. And that's what went into the tiers that we proposed.
Okay, thanks, Christine.
And we used data to propose those tiers.
Justin, do you have anything you want to add since you worked with Andrew?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, Jared, but about 30% of labs will fall into that 1 to 10 FOA range. So a lot of the small labs are captured there, and a third in the 11 to 49 range. So in those bottom two ranges are the majority of the labs.
Okay, that is actually helpful to hear. I think if memory serves, I think 50% of the labs in the state are small labs, like less, maybe 1 to 2 person labs, or maybe 1 to 5 people labs. So it seems like those first two ranges, then, if that covers 60% of the labs, then that would cover those two ranges. I would suggest maybe looking at revisiting it a little bit more closely to see for those very small labs with those 1 to 2 people, just to see if there could be a little bit more parsimony with it, just with respect to them and the fee considerations. This also kind of reminded me, during the proposed regulations adoption, there was talk about having in a transparency option with a check-in annually, kind of reporting on the implementation of the program and the new proposed fees because of concerns with the adverse impacts to the small labs. And so perhaps some of this fee analysis would be beneficial to be included in that report to the board, and maybe just a friendly suggestion to see if that could be one of the things that is kind of discussed or brought to the board, so that that change on fees would be reported back to. And thank you for the answers and the input there.
Well, Gerald, just to tie that one up, yes, as program works to do their assessment after the first year, the fee component, we can look at that. We look at it anyway, so we have to make sure when we get our budget next year, are we going to generate the proper revenue? We'll have a better understanding of the number of labs that fall in. Right now, we're using estimates of what we think is going to come in, but we'll know a better idea of what falls into each of those tiers, and then we can work with the regulated community to say, do we need to adjust these at all within the confines of the fact that we have to pay for staff?
That sounds great. And also, I guess another question had just come to mind, but with the third-party fees, I wanted to confirm. I thought I'd seen on the presentation on Monday that the labs doing that don't pay the same amount of fees as the other fees. I just wanted to confirm my understanding of that was correct.
So if I understand the question, if you were to use a third-party assessor's fee, and then, of course, there's multiple different TPAs out there, and they may have a different fee for their assessment, yes, you'd pay their fee. None of that revenue comes to the water board. If you choose to use ELAP, again, we're proposing an assessment fee for $5,000, and that goes towards the program cost.
Yeah, so again, every lab will have an annual base fee and a FOA tier amount that they pay on an annual basis. Those that use a third-party assessor technically will pay the state less because that portion is going to a third-party assessor. I don't know what the third-party assessors are going to charge, but it would assume to be higher than a couple $1,000s since it's the complex nature. So yeah, what they pay towards our program may be less. What they pay as an entity total will be higher because they're paying the third-party assessor as well as paying their annual fee to us. Jared, did it answer your question?
Actually, it did, and I'm sorry to dominate this conversation. One last question with Christine on the line. I thought it would be a good one to ask, just in terms of the timeline with the fees, or with the regulations. I think they were adopted on the 5th, and I think there was a window for review, and then it's sent off to OAL. I just didn't know if there was a status check on where things currently are with that process.
Yeah, so we are submitting the final package with the final response to comments to OAL before the deadline, which is, I believe, around September, and then early September, and then OAL will approve it, and it will be effective October 1st. So that's where we're at now.
Okay, and does the final statement of reasons, does it have some of the modeling updated to reflect the FOAs and the new fee structures to the economic modeling?
I don't believe so. I mean, it does to the extent that it looks at the cost. So, what we put out for the initial statement of reasons and that economic analysis is what to anticipate would be in the final. We're not adding anything more.
I know for us, for CASA, we had requested in our comments to see maybe that division of, in the eyesore, it was like a small, medium, and large size labs. And I think kind of the concerns I expressed here with the way that those are represented in the FOAs, the way it was in the eyesore, we kind of requested to see that redone, showing the very small labs how they had been impacted or would be impacted by this, kind of with the concern that the very small labs are the programs that are going to be bearing the costs, predominant costs that are estimated. And was that something that has been responded to or developed into the final rulemaking materials you're submitting?
Yeah, I'll go back and look at that comment. I'm not familiar with that comment that you submitted and see what we have. We have to respond to all the comments. So to the extent that we're able to do that, we would include that response.
All right. Thank you for all the answers here. I appreciate your time today.
All right, thank you, Jared. Anyone else on the line have any questions? Or Justin, do we have any email questions? He's nodding, so.
Yes, we have a few more. I apologize if I don't get the name right, but Shashmitha Reddy from Inland Empire had 2 questions. First question was similar to Amber Baylor's about the program cost, and I think Christine did a good job of answering that already. So I think that one's covered. Her second question is their renewal application is due July 31st, as their certificate expires on October 31st. Which fees will apply to them? And so again, as our last slide showed on this presentation, up until this new fee structure gets adopted and implemented on October 1st, the current fee structure still applies. The next question is from Amanda Thompson of Palmdale Water District. She wants to know, how can a lab find out how many FOAs they have?
So this is Christine. We will work with the laboratories again to schedule one-on-one appointments for priority labs that are expiring this year, and we'll realign them so they can understand the conversion. And so we will work with the laboratories, and they'll be hearing more about that soon. So I can't answer that for that particular lab, that specific case.
Amber Baylor has a few more questions. Christine, she wants to clarify the comment you made that non-sophisticated labs can have a TPA, and wants to know what happens to the fee structure to support ELAP if most labs in California shift to TPAs. And second part of that is, wasn't the intent of ELAP to accredit and audit laboratories?
So I think I'm going to pitch that over to the C branch folks to ask the questions about the structure of the lab if the revenue doesn't come in if labs use TPAs.
And Christy, so this is David Ceccarelli here. So yeah, if the question is if all the labs are moving over and using third-party assessments, then ELAP would need to evaluate that program. We'd have to look at the staffing and the resources, and maybe there's not a need to do assessments in that workload. You know, if there's other areas of the program where those couldn't be moved to, then you know there would be an opportunity then to downsize the program. Of course, that's through a budget process. But basically what's happening is, you know, we would no longer be doing the assessments, and those will all be done through third parties. So again, it would be, you know, an evaluation process to look at the needs of the program, for one, you know, putting together a work plan in place, and then working with the Department of Finance to depend on if, you know, if that part of the program no longer needs to be performed, which would result in a reduction of staffing, which would then ultimately reduce the cost of the program and potentially reduce the amount of the fees. So I think maybe, and then there was a second part though, I think, Christine, you wanted to answer?
Well, the question was, isn't our job to accredit labs? And yeah, it is. But the law allows us to contract out to third-party assessments, and that is what we are doing because the demand outpaces the technical and the resource ability that we have.
Next question from Amber is, can you please share the model methodology for FOAs? Might need some clarification with that from you. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Or is that based on what the request from Debbie Webster about the conversion of FOTs to FOAs?
Hi, this is Amber. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate taking the call and the questions that I've had thus far. It's very insightful. Yeah, the question was, normally whenever we have methodologies associated with changes and fee through our member agencies, that process is articulated through, you know, essentially a standard operating procedure that lays this out. We share that methodology, the raw Excel database with our engineers and other staff to review. What my request is here is, could you please help us, and in building on Debbie Wester's comment, on sharing the FOA to FOT method, which was in one of my previous comment letters, not understanding kind of the math associated with that, with some of the analytics that you're running in-house. That would really be really helpful for us to get a better understanding as we look at some of the costs associated with the potential drivers to our own budgets here in the municipal sector. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get with program and we'll have a discussion with that.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be really helpful for us to have, you know, so we could kind of get on the same page with you. It sounds like this is going to be an iterative process, and really the request here is building some of the, you know, the skills that we have developed here on some of the, you know, the cost allocation processes from a technical basis for our own job functions and assist in some of those things, knowing what the laboratories are also doing kind of on the ground level too. So we'd like to, that open and transparent process, and then also from a technical assistance perspective, if we can assist, that would be, we'd be more than happy and would volunteer our time to help participate in that. So thank you so much.
Next question from Josie Tellers again. On Monday, some of the third-party assessors that presented are also ABs and can do accreditation based on California-driven standards. If this is so, how will ELAP treat this, and how is the fee impacted? Christine, we might need you to take that question.
Sure, and I think we answered that question earlier in the stakeholder meeting, that there are different pathways that a lab can be accredited, and we're allowing that through the third-party assessment agencies, and we also allow that through other state accrediting bodies that are TNI. And so if our regulations say that labs should comply with TNI, then those other states that are accrediting to TNI can do the same thing, and they have done it before. Oregon does it all the time. They cross the border. Utah does it. Several Southern California municipal agencies, a couple are assessed by Utah. So the way that affects our fees is that they pay that state like they would pay a TPA if they were to use them, and then you would pay the administrative fees to be accredited to do work in California and submit your data to our state agencies.
This is Jared. A follow-up question on that. I'd read somewhere that Oregon only credits labs in Oregon. They won't credit a lab outside of Oregon. And likewise with Utah, if they were to perform the accreditation, they would issue a credit, a certificate from the state of Utah. Is that a reciprocity issue, or is it kind of like dual recognition for how California would handle that? Or I'm just curious, kind of that technical difference there.
So reciprocity means that the laboratory is out of state and that they get accreditation from that home state. And then we accept that certificate for accreditation in California. And so if you're a lab in California and you want to use another state that's TNI recognized and that is a TNI accrediting body, then you would have to call them and they would come into our state and accredit us. And Oregon does do that. Utah does that as well. So, these again are specific third-party assessment questions, and we answered a lot of them in the FAQ, but I'm happy to talk to you separately or answer this in an email or conversation specifically about TPAs.
Sure, thank you. I'll follow up that way.
Next question from Basant Galib of City of Merced. She would like to know, how do we determine the 2-year period to schedule a TPA, and who is responsible for scheduling the audits?
So I can take that. If you were to look on your certificate and you have an expiration date, and what you want to do is you want to make sure you're applying for accreditation 90 days before that expiration date. So what that means is if you are using a TPA and you have a sophisticated instrument, you'll have to contact them on, at a time that works for you, right? That gives you enough time to contact them, for them to come out and accredit your lab, assess your lab, provide you with the inspection report and the corrective action plan to include in your application package. That's a complete application package. If you're not a lab that has to use a third-party assessor, which is if you're a lab that uses sophisticated instrument, you would contact ELAP. And we're working on the procedure to do that, and we would come out before your application package is due.
Amber Baylor sent in another question. She says, thank you for taking my questions thus far. Since the regulations call for TNI -2 and not full TNI, will the other states accredit to the California -2 standard? This is important for the fee questions.
The laboratories that are other state AVs, they're going to credit to TNI. And if they're not giving you California accreditation, they're giving you TNI accreditation when you call them and ask you to assess their laboratories. So it's not the -2, it's to TNI.
At this point, I don't show any more email questions if anyone on the phone has any further comments.
Just thank you, Christine, for that comment. Just for the clarification, because I thought that in the initial statement of reasons, any modification of the standard, the difficulty therein to have outside assessors was kind of a key consideration. So I'm just trying to make sure I fully understand that the modification of the TNI standard that's currently being proposed in the regulatory package, you're stating that those modifications will be assessed by the auditors. Is that correct?
So
I'm
confused with your question. Go ahead, Kim.
Well, I was just suggesting, and I think this is something that we'll have to look into, but if another state came out and did the accreditation to TNI and identified those two exceptions as deficiencies, and that was brought back to California with the application package, perhaps that's something that we could use, accepting those deficiencies. They don't use California law, though. They're going to accredit to TNI, but California is not going to require those two exceptions. So perhaps that's something that we could work with. We're going to have to figure that out, and thanks for bringing that up so we can look into that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It just helps when we're trying to kind of sort out. I just didn't hear through the TPA, and this is, I think, really important in the fee discussion, because if we're looking at, going to other TPAs and the difference in the fees between ELAP and an outside assessor body, and then, what we need to do from a laboratory's perspective to get to a higher TNI standard. And I think I think it's important. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to look into it. Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments on the phone? And while we're waiting, again, there's some time delay. Just a few things. A copy of the presentation, if you would like a copy of that, please email us. For those that have to post stuff on our intranet site, it has to be web accessible. I've been told there's issues with PowerPoint presentations making them accessible. So right now, we're not allowed to post it onto our intranet site, but we can email it to anyone who asks for that. If we can go to slide 12. And then the next steps, again, we are anticipating going to our board next month on July 21st. David had mentioned, if you have any comments related to what's being presented today, you want us to take it into consideration, please have those submitted to us by next Thursday. We have to make sure we have our documents routed through exec for review and submitted to the board clerk a month in advance of the board meeting. So we have a tight time frame to make sure we get all of our packages and all of our documents ready, but we do want to make sure we take in consideration any comments, questions. We'll loop in program, obviously, as needed for the fee portion of that. David, anything else you want to add?
No, I know there was just, one couple takeaways, action items. I know Debbie Webster's request about having the spreadsheet with the conversion of the FOAs and FOTs of what we know and what program and fee staff have worked on. So we'll be able to provide that. It has taken some time, but we have kind of narrowed that down, so we'll be able to provide that. And I know Amber had a question. We'll look into that, and we'll get some work with program on that. And like I said, Glenn said, again, any comments, questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Glenn or I regarding the fee portion. And then if you can provide us any comments or feedback by next Thursday, the 18th, we'd really appreciate that.
We do have one more question that just came in from Debbie Webster. She'd like to know on the amendment fees, is this an unlimited number of amendments for FOAs for a single fee, or is it per FOA?
I think it'll be for the process, the amendment request. I don't have the number in front of me. I flipped to the wrong slide. Whatever that cost is, $1,000 or $2,000. And then when you do your next year comes through, whatever the number of FOAs you have, you'll be charged for that tier rate at that time. Again, Debbie, if I didn't answer that, or if you have any follow-up questions, just reach out to us and we can address that separately.
So yeah, that's correct, Glenn. I mean, the plan was that the amendments would come in, that you pay that flat fee on that amendment fee. And then, however, if that boosted you, would put you over to a next tier, then you'd be subject to be paying that next tier.
Thanks, David. Justin, have we received anything else? Christine, since you are on the phone, is there any final comments you have on the program side before we wrap stuff up with me and David here?
Oh, thanks for that opportunity. I just want to thank everybody for participating in this call, and just remind everyone that we have a lot of information about CPAs on our webpage, and we're planning a whole host of different webinars and opportunities to help everyone comply, and looking forward to working with everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine.
We did get another question.
Oh, we got another one.
Sorry.
Okay.
So Shamitha wants to follow up on Amber's question on accreditation from other ABs. No one else offers 2016 T&I, so who else can we go with? Others have used Utah, but they are not T&I 2016. Can I go to non-T&I ABs as well, such as Arizona?
No.
I think that's something, we're focusing on fees right now, and we have a lot of stuff coming up for the TPAs. We have some work that we're going to be doing to bring back to the board the agreements that the TPAs will have to enter into, and so there will be additional time to work out these TPA issues.
Thanks for that, Kim. But the law says that we can allow the use of another third-party assessor if they follow the T&I criteria. And so another state like Arizona that's not T&I accredited can't be used.
Okay, thank you. And again, I do want to state that as it relates to fees, I know a lot of questions kind of straddle the line, or a lot of them are programmatic related, but as it relates to fees, this is a new process, as we stated before. We do anticipate reviewing it on a yearly basis, especially as we kind of see things kind of hone in and we get to that proper level. Again, I've done enough forecasting and all over the years to know that we can do our best to estimate and anticipate what we think the numbers are going to come out. But wherever we're off, then we'll reassess that, and we'll have stakeholder meetings if needed, if we do need to make any major adjustments, just to make sure we dial it in correctly.
And just, again, one of my points, kind of ending point is when the program came over, we had a fee structure in place for paying for a base and an FOT, but it just wasn't aligned with where the staff was working and their cost. And as Glenn mentioned, I mean, it may still take us a couple years to really kind of figure out into those weeds, but now we feel like we have a structure where we can start to capture that, meaning, everyone pays the base, and we know that pays for the indirect cost, and we have that aligned. The more FOAs you have, of course, there's more staff time that would be involved in that process, and so we have a structure there on that for those fees, and then of course, whether you're using us ELAP, there's a cost associated with paying for that assessment. And, we've calculated it out that, anywhere from 30 hours to 90 hours, I think at $180 an hour, it pays for about 27 to 28 hours. But again, we now have a fee set for that staff time. And then, there's a lot of discussion on the amendments. And again, it's something where in the past, amendments have come in and staff have had to work on that. And it's, there was never a fee or anything associated with that staff time to do that amendment workload. And so again, the amendments fee is there to help pay for that cost and that workload. As again, we'll continue these discussions. I think we've designed a fee structure, a framework to help capture our costs and pay for the program. And as the year and a year and a half goes through, we can continue to evaluate that. We can as an earlier stakeholder talked about informing the board. We continue to inform our board on our fees and our revenues and our expenditures. And that's, again, the stakeholder process that we'd like to continue to have with the stakeholders is to, have these discussions about the revenue and the workload and the expenditures. So, Glenn, you have anything else like that to that?
Nope, I think you covered it there, so you want to sign us off?
Yes, so I appreciate it. Again, please reach out to Glenn or I on any of the fee issues. We'll, again, look forward to any feedback or anything by Thursday. Again, we're going to be having some internal discussions. We'll be talking to our board. And again, that we're looking at taking a structure to our board for consideration and adoption on July 21st of 2020. Again, I want to thank everyone for participating in this meeting. I didn't mention this earlier. These meetings have been a little difficult trying to figure out whether we do this through Zoom or Teams or kind of have a webcast meeting. And we're kind of working out the bugs here, whether, in the future, hopefully we can all get together and, be together in our future meetings. But, we may be moving to more of a Zoom environment or Teams environment. But for this meeting, we wanted to, kind of have a webcast meeting. And we appreciate your patience with the delay. And again, I just want to restate, appreciate everyone participating in the meeting and stay safe and again, hope to hear from your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, John.